Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clinical Trials Digital Week, brought to you by the producers of the Face-to-Face Clinical Trials Conference, visiting Barcelona in November this year, and our T3 Trials Tech and Transformation Conference, visiting Philadelphia in August of this year. My name is Lauren Barry, and I'll be your host for today's session, titled Identifying High-Performing Sites and Engaging Patients. First, I'll cover some quick housekeeping items. If you experience difficulties with audio or advancing slides, refresh your screen by hitting F5. If you are experiencing other issues, hit the question mark button to receive assistance. At any time during the presentation, submit your questions into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen. In 24 hours, you'll receive a link to watch the recording of this session. You can also download all of the resources in our resource list box, which is also to the left of your screen. Let's now begin by introducing today's speakers from Medpace. We have Maisha Campbell, the Associate Director of Patient Recruitment, and Catherine Palmer, Senior Clinical Trial Manager. Thank you for joining us today, Maisha and Catherine. With that being said, I'll hand it over to you to begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Thank you everyone for joining today's presentation. We are pleased to be able to speak with you about some important topics in our industry. So for our agenda today, we're going to discuss patient recruitment challenges. How do we plan for these challenges and effectively recruit for our studies? How do we use our data resources, both internal and external, for recruitment? What process can be put in place to identify and engage the right sites? And then once we've identified these sites, how do we effectively support patient enrollment and retention? So first, let's talk about the patient recruitment challenges. So as we're all aware, one of the key challenges in clinical trials is recruitment of patients.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clinical Trials Digital Week, brought to you by the producers of the Face-to-Face Clinical Trials Conference, visiting Barcelona in November this year, and our T3 Trials Tech and Transformation Conference, visiting Philadelphia in August of this year. My name is Lauren Barry, and I'll be your host for today's session, titled Identifying High-Performing Sites and Engaging Patients. First, I'll cover some quick housekeeping items. If you experience difficulties with audio or advancing slides, refresh your screen by hitting F5. If you are experiencing other issues, hit the question mark button to receive assistance. At any time during the presentation, submit your questions into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen. In 24 hours, you'll receive a link to watch the recording of this session. You can also download all of the resources in our resource list box, which is also to the left of your screen. Let's now begin by introducing today's speakers from Medpace. We have Maisha Campbell, the Associate Director of Patient Recruitment, and Catherine Palmer, Senior Clinical Trial Manager. Thank you for joining us today, Maisha and Catherine. With that being said, I'll hand it over to you to begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Thank you everyone for joining today's presentation. We are pleased to be able to speak with you about some important topics in our industry. So for our agenda today, we're going to discuss patient recruitment challenges. How do we plan for these challenges and effectively recruit for our studies? How do we use our data resources, both internal and external, for recruitment? What process can be put in place to identify and engage the right sites? And then once we've identified these sites, how do we effectively support patient enrollment and retention? So first, let's talk about the patient recruitment challenges. So as we're all aware, one of the key challenges in clinical trials is recruitment of patients. I think this illustration from SysScript really shows just how important clinical trial recruitment is and how we need to do a better job in terms of making sure that patients are aware of clinical trial opportunities. 80% of clinical trials fail to finish on time. That's because 50% of sites enroll one or no patients into this study. So how do we maximize site potential as well as looking outside of sites to identify patients for clinical trials? 40% of our sponsors' budgets are used on clinical trial recruitment. So how do we effectively use those budgets and even reduce those budgets so that we're focused on clinical operations? And then when we do identify the appropriate patients for the trial, 30% of those patients ultimately drop out. So how do we keep our patients engaged, enrolled, and ease their burdens of trial participation so that they are supportive in clinical trial? Let's start with the top reason enrollment lags at sites. A lot of times the protocol may be too restrictive. The PI or the study coordinator may not be as engaged as we would like. And really within the practice, they may have too few patients. They may have competing trials that are grabbing the attention of the PI or the study coordinator. They may have a referral network or even additional satellite sites. So how do we make sure that those referral resources are engaged and that they know about the study so that they can refer patients? And simply, they may not have enough sites to actually enroll. So they may have a lot of studies, but not enough staff to support those studies. And so what do we do as an industry to make sure we're supported and we're providing them with those tools that can help them focus on our studies? And then going outside of the practice, we know that referrals could be rare. And so how do we make sure that we're engaging referral sources and that we're also engaging sites that don't have the resources, the time, or the skills to effectively market directly to patients outside of their site database? So we'll get into strategies such as social media and online media, but how do we make sure that we are empowering sites that they not only effectively enroll using these strategies, but that we're also supporting those efforts? I really like this illustration on the leaky pipe that Rebar Interactive produced. You know, it really shows that you start off with a large patient pool, and due to issues that could be related to the inclusion, exclusion criteria, patient awareness, even if they do fit the initial IE criteria, screen failures, you can see that what at first glance seems to be a very large patient pool can really dwindle down. And so how do we really manage that? Now, how do we address that leaky pipe where we have a large pool of patients, but we know that will dwindle down? You do that by having a dedicated recruitment and retention plan up. And so what does that mean? That means that you're developing strategies and supporting your clinical operations team from the very beginning of the study. You're using your internal and external data resources during the feasibility process to identify where the patients are and also where the sites are. You're identifying your top performing sites because you know that these sites will have faster enrollment and startup timelines, and they're your key sites that you've used in the past to actually enroll patients. You're employing a patient-centric method, and so what that means is that you want to enroll engaged patients for greater patient satisfaction. And then you're customizing your plan for each study. We all have heard the term, I know it's overused, one size does not fit all. And so we need to make sure that on every study that we're appropriately identifying what tools, be it materials or other digital tactics, advocacy, what will apply for that particular study. And then we're leveraging our vendor partnerships. And so do we have partnerships with advertising firms, with patient recruitment groups? Do we have social media? We have big data partners. Really all of those vendor partnerships that help us support faster enrollment timelines. I'm now going to turn it over to Catherine, who's going to show us how using data resources for recruitment can help speed up enrollment.
Thanks, Maisha. Okay, so a refined data-driven approach allows for alignment of a targeted population with motivated and experienced investigators to create a precise and effective recruitment strategy. However, data alone can lead to spurious conclusions. Therefore, it is key that data available is analysed and used to make an informed decision around strategy for site selection. So, for example, prior site performance, key opinion leaders and investigator relationships, standards of care, country-specific regulations, and cultural differences all need to be taken into consideration in order to align the targeted population with motivated and experienced investigators. At Medpace, we find it effective to use both external and internal data sources for formulating our strategy, such as global health research platforms. Access to public data and private global health research platforms provide information for over 400,000 investigators across 300,000 studies and involving more than 135 million patients to supplement our internal metrics. Metadata, Trinetics, Sightline, Data Monitor are all examples. Clinical study history. Our clinical trial management system, ClinTrack, provides years of investigator startup, enrollment, and quality performance metrics to enable identification of high-quality, reliable sites. Central Laboratories. A global repository of laboratory data drives sound recommendations relative to key inclusion and exclusion criteria to target investigators with the correct patient population. Electronic data collection, provide a wealth of information regarding inclusion-exclusion criteria and their effect on enrollment in similar studies can help to inform study design and recruitment. Imaging core labs assist with the identification of investigators in key therapeutic areas with access to specialized equipment and experience required to conduct some of the most complicated studies currently designed. I'll now talk through couple of example scenarios. So these maps here illustrate a search for sites with previous experience in a single indication. As a first step, Medpace utilized both epidemiological and global health research platforms to understand the location of patients throughout the US and the EU. The epidemiology data shows a high prevalence of the disease by region in the US and the EU, whereas the heat maps indicate pockets of patients surrounding sites conducting research. As I was saying earlier, it's important to have an expert review and analyze data to come to an informed decision. As you can see here, this data, in the absence of site performance metrics, could lead to erroneous conclusions regarding placement of this study. And then step 2. Analysis of site location indicates large numbers of sites that have conducted studies in the target indication. Overlaying performance data in prior clinical trials allows a more precise localization of high-performing quality sites relative to target population. This data highlights the importance of analyzing site performance on previous studies to effectively position the study with sites who are motivated to perform and have demonstrated prior success. I'll hand back over to Maisha now.
Thank you, Catherine. So as Catherine noted, using data resources to identify where sites and patients are is a critical step in identifying and engaging the right sites for the study. It's a very important first step to make sure that we're engaging and supporting sites with their enrollment efforts. Identifying the right sites is critical to achieving overall study startup and enrollment goals. Feasibility is a critical touch point to assess the site's ability to enroll the intended patient population. The feasibility questionnaire should be specific and well targeted to the protocol and the patient population that we're recruiting. We find that a site's responsiveness during the feasibility process is a really good indicator of their future dedication to trial success. So you're looking for those sites who are responsive, they're asking questions, they're really engaged throughout the feasibility process, because it shows that they really want the study and they're really looking in their databases to ensure that they have the appropriate patient population for the study. Then once you identify those sites who may be able to participate in the study, your qualification visits are really going to be key to ensure a site is able to conduct the trial. So when you're going on site, you're looking for things that are protocol specific, you know, for those that need to have pharmacies on site, that need to have certain lab or certain equipment for protocol, for the protocol. You're making sure that those are available and that they have those. Leveraging long-term site relationships will foster a more collaborative and engaging trial experience. And then ensuring your site's recruitment efforts are well supported allows them to focus efforts on identification and enrollment of the targeted patient population. And so we're going to go through some of these strategies to make sure that sites are supported once we've identified the appropriate site for the study. So you've identified your site, they've come on board, and now you've started recruitment. Now, how do you make sure that those sites are maximizing their enrollment efforts and they're meeting or exceeding the overall study goals? Well, that starts with building a strong rapport with the site up front, and also identifying if they have referral sources and getting in contact with those referral sources if possible, or giving the site tools that enables them to get in contact with their referral sources to find out more about the study. So serving as an extension of the site staff, so really being collaborative to ensure that your strategies are accepted and implemented. You really want to alleviate their burden. So at Medpace, we implement strategies such as site chart review, data entry, and other strategies that really help the site to focus on enrollment if they need that extra support on site. Consider a preferred site program that strategically aligns with your top performing sites. The strategy is to develop vital relationships with lead sites across the globe and to strengthen existing relationships with excelling sites, enabling you to deliver effective strategies for your sponsors. The benefit includes having a dedicated contact that will focus on your studies. When you have preferred site relationships, you'll get real-time feedback in the protocol development stage on the study design. These contacts will also really let you know if your recruitment and retention strategies that you're using will be effective, and they can give you that feedback so that you can mitigate and maybe even change those strategies if they're not working. It strengthens your relationship for future study opportunities with the sites, and typically these sites are the first to be activated across the board. So what's the goal of a preferred site program? The goal is to develop relationships with the lead sites that will help you across all of the studies that you're engaged. The goal is that they'll provide quality feedback for your preliminary feasibility efforts, that they will have expedited startup and enrollment timelines, that they'll ensure fast and consistent enrollment across the board, and that they'll produce high-quality data. Similar to the preferred site program, it's really good to also develop strategic relationship with site networks. This really strengthens your capability to deliver study patients because they're able to work with multiple sites at one time. It builds trust and mutual professional respect within the networks for a seamless and effective study process when you have a preferred site network. We recommend putting an MSA in place to expedite the feasibility and the contracting phase. We also recommend that you really understand the network's operation model. Do they have central contracting? Do they have a central logistics center? Are you speaking with a central point of contact to provide them with feedback? This really helps in terms of expediting enrollment on studies. Preferred networks are those that have sites in a variety of indications. And again, those that can start up quickly and enroll quickly on your studies. When we highly recommend considering a monthly meeting with preferred network liaisons, also with preferred site liaisons, to discuss your study needs and upcoming work. It really allows them in real time to be able to discuss what's going on active studies, and then also to provide you feedback on future studies. Just wanted to walk through a case study to show you just how engaging sites can really help support recruitment. So as you can see from this example in an SMD study, that there were significant recruitment challenges. Patients were unknown to site staff, and therefore they had limited medical history of the patient before scheduling a screening visit. It was a difficult IE criteria specific to muscle strength. And then the number of visits and the study commitment was a challenge for some of these patients. And so what we did was we employed a specific site engagement program. So for each site, we followed up, and specific for each site, identified what their specific site recruitment challenges were. And we implemented things that would help each site and strategies across for those sites. And as you can see from our key takeaway side, that the average screen at the beginning of the study from April to June was 7.5 screens a month. Once we started our site engagement program, the average screens from July to October were 11.25 a month. This enabled the study to meet its enrollment target earlier than projected, and that's what we want to do. All right, Catherine and I both are going to speak to you now about how do we effectively support patients. Now that we've used our data resources to identify where the sites and the patients may be, we've selected and identified the appropriate sites, we've engaged those sites across the board. Now, how do we effectively engage patients for the study? Catherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Maisha. So designing the protocol with the patient in mind can really have an effect upon patient engagement. Gathering patient feedback during the protocol development phase from patient advocates is a key ingredient in ensuring the study needs are aligned with advocacy efforts. Understanding the nuances of patient needs, especially in the development of the schedule of events, means a more engaged study participant and potential for less protocol deviations and amendments by addressing these needs upfront. Identifying study-specific awareness and educational tools includes thoughtful insight into what's important to the study subjects will lead to higher recruitment and retention rates. Maisha, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'll walk through how do we engage patient advocates and some of the other strategies that Catherine went through. Patient advocates need to feel that their opinions and shared experiences are being heard in the development of new therapies and even existing therapies. By engaging patient advocates up front, the likelihood of developing true partnerships is increased. Effectively building relationships with patient advocates means that they are actively engaged in protocol review. Modifying your protocol based on your feedback will lend itself to positive word of mouth about the study in patient communities and potential referral networks. The examples below of potential study awareness opportunities can be available as a result of these partnerships. That could include web listings on the advocacy group website, newsletter placements informing members about the study, patient email blasts from the advocacy group membership list, and other out-of-the-box places that the study population may be found and study information can be shared. Patient advocates are aware of where the patients are, of where the caregivers are, if it happens to be a caregiver-driven study, and they really can be key to enrollment. So we want to make sure that they're empowered, that we hear their voice, and that we're actively engaging them up front in study enrollment. Now, know the key drivers for the patient population. Why should patients consider your trial? Why should they join? It's really important to seek patient and caregiver buy-in by clearly stating why your clinical trial is the best option for them. When you identify patients and you bring them in for either that initial screening visit or you've pre-identified them and you're speaking with them about the study, it's really important to listen to their questions, and they need to make sure that they feel as if their voices are being heard. This is really critical, and a key feedback that I hear from sites quite often is that patients want to know more. They want to participate in clinical trials, but they also need to make sure that that clinical trial is the right clinical trial for them. So making sure that you're addressing their questions and that you're treating them as a true partner will lend itself to better recruitment. And also, don't be afraid to use your social influences to get your message to patients. And so this could include a variety of different ways, of different things. So you could use your own Facebook posts if you have a Facebook page, blogs, you could write articles, and you can have either free or paid promotion. This really helps to engage those different patient communities and those different patient groups to get the word out specifically about clinical trial participation, and then we can drill down even further about a specific study. And then I think it's important to really just note that, engaging patients is more than just materials. We know that materials are very important on clinical trials, especially materials that are used to effectively educate the patient up front about the study so that you can recruit well, but then also for retention, providing them with those materials, such as patient handbooks, that will help them understand the study long term. But be proactive and not rely just on materials to recruit patients into the study. We talked about developing a recruitment plan up front. So it's very important that sites are even developing and creating a plan to minimize enrollment lagging and potential retention issues. It's going to be important that we incorporate additional patient engagement strategies up front. So not just relying on materials and the site's database. We really have to think about digital strategies such as online media and social media advertising. When we talk about that 30% dropout rate up front, so we know that training is going to be very critical for subjects, and so making sure that patients have training videos on the protocol requirements so that they remain engaged, and that you are providing participation support initiatives, because patients do want to feel empowered, and they do want to feel as if they are making a difference in a clinical research. And so how do we support that? So we want to raise community awareness. We want to engage our referral networks, and this will lead to optimizing sites' recruitment efforts. And how do you do that? You do that by networking with key influencers and advocates within the community. You do that by educating patients and or caregiver at support groups. You can even canvas your community for additional venues to contact where patients may be. We talked about materials. It's going to be very important that as you are doing your patient engagement outreach, that you're distributing and displaying study materials in the appropriate places. And so sometimes what we'll do on our studies, we'll actually identify referral sources. It could be things like community barbershops, if you're recruiting, where patients may see the study from those avenues, from community centers, senior centers, but you make sure that you're identifying those locations and you're meeting with those groups and asking them to display and provide information about the study. You can liaise at local therapeutic or community health presentations and events so that the community is aware and you have an engaged audience. And also looking for opportunities for coverage in your local regular publications, newsletters, websites, etc. And then focusing on patient retention. Really the goal is to mitigate participation obstacles for patients. We want to reinforce study participation. And then by doing that, you have an engaged patient and or caregiver. So this starts with providing patients and caregivers with the appropriate support. That is going to be critical for retention. Addressing needs such as travel and home health services to ease the burden of study participation, we have found to really increase our retention rates across multiple studies. Supplying items to sites that really support long visits. So for example, if you have a patient that's coming in and it's an 8-hour visit because there's infusion, it's an infusion visit, and they have to be on the site for a long period of time, providing them with items such as an entertainment tablet where they can watch Netflix, they can play games, they can really focus on other things allows for a better patient experience. And that patient will then feel as if, you know, they're being supported when they're coming in for their study visits. And what's also key is acknowledging when patients achieve study milestones and also thanking them. It really shows that you appreciate their time commitment to the study, that you acknowledge their involvement, and it really reinvigorates their commitment to continued study participation. All right, so we've come to the end of today's presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine, who will give our key takeaways.
Thanks, Maisha. So yeah, I think that in conclusion of what Maisha and I have just presented to you today, I truly believe that you can see the benefit that using data sources for recruitment, identifying and engaging the right sites, and effectively supporting patients can have. Where it's resulting in a faster recruitment timeline and a more engaged patient population. Maisha, do you have anything to add there?
I don't. I think you summed it up perfectly. Now, if we can open up the floor for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Maisha and Catherine, for an excellent presentation. We've received a few questions already, but we'll give the rest of you a moment to enter your questions in the Q&A box to the left of the slides. Before we begin the Q&A, I'll run through some brief announcements. First, I'd like to thank Medpace and our Digital Week sponsors. Next, I'd like to quickly draw your attention to our face-to-face clinical trials conference visiting Barcelona in November of this year, and our T3 Trials, Tech, and Transformation Conference visiting Philadelphia in August of this year. At these leading annual clinical trial events, you can hear from hundreds of expert speakers and network with peers. Also, be sure to check out the resource list to the left of the screen, where you can download a large collection of useful resources. Now, back to Maisha and Catherine to begin the Q&A. So we do have a couple of questions, Maisha and Catherine, so let's jump right in. The first question, is big data just a passing fad? How much faith should be put into it?
Shall I take that one, Maisha? So no, I really don't think it is a big fad. As I was saying earlier in the presentation, using big data can really help assist stakeholders with mitigating the risk of enrollment and retention related issues right from the get-go of a study. So Medpace's IntelliPace system combines that internal and external data we discussed earlier from multiple platforms to define the optimal enrollment strategy. And this multi-step data and experience-driven approach permits Medpace to tailor our recruitment strategy to the sponsor's protocol, timelines, and or costs. So I think that answers your question, Lauren.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That's perfect. So the next question we have here, how long do you typically work with a site before you consider them for a preferred site designation?
So typically it's not really about time. I mean, we have long-term relationships with most of our sites at Medpace, but we really look at our top enrolling. So we use our internal CTMS system to really look to see which sites have performed well according to their therapeutic alignment. And then we take those metrics and we identify the sites that were high recruiters, that not only recruited the patients, but they also had very few protocol deviations, so they really provided that high quality data that we spoke about earlier. And then also we look at our relationships, because we believe that relationships are really key in terms of driving long-term success. So we look at sites and their relationship with us and how proactive and just how that relationship is in identifying our preferred sites and making sites part of the preferred site program. I hope that answered the question.
That's perfect, Manisha. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the next one we have here, what can we do to ensure reliable feasibility of a potential new study, including reliable cost forecasting?
I'll take that one. So Medpace conducts review of protocol drafts by its medical experts and then its CTMs, such as myself, and functional area leads to identify potential study design issues, included but not limited to whether the appropriate assessments have been employed to achieve these objectives of the study, and then potential areas for protocol deviations, whether the project is feasible from a patient site perspective, and the potential burden to the site patient, as well as potential barriers to recruitment. So in addition, following award of each study, the CTM will conduct a feasibility assessment with potential sites to understand their potential issues from a site perspective. The information is collated and recommendations are made to the sponsor as appropriate to consider design revisions. In addition, Medpace will develop a risk management plan to conduct the risks and develop mitigations and contingencies to address perceived and actual risks. And then in terms of reliable cost forecasting, Medpace has developed cost assumptions based on 1 year's based on our experience in clinical research. And cost is based on the complexity of the study, geography, number of sites and patients, etc., to ensure that studies are costed appropriately.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Catherine. The next question we have here, which of the patient recruitment tools you mentioned are you finding to be the most effective?
So I can take that one. So, that's a good question, and it really depends on the study population and the particular trial. So some sites and some studies, are really going to look outside of their database. Even if they have patients within their database, it may be a large global study, and we need to identify additional patients to enroll for the study. And so what we've really found to be effective lately is social media and specifically online patient communities. They have really helped in terms of driving awareness, also working directly with advocacy groups to send information out to their members has directly impacted enrollment in a positive way for our studies. And then for studies where we see that, the patients really are at the site and giving them effective ways that they can recruit or providing them with support, such as with database, chart review, has really been effective in terms of recruiting patients for studies.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Manisha. The next one we have, if we're working with a patient recruitment company, how does that mesh with the CRO?
Okay, I'll take this one as well. And so, at Medpace, similar to our preferred site networks and our preferred sites, we also have preferred patient recruitment vendors who we work with. And we find that having a preferred relationship really meshes well overall, because you really get to understand that organization understands you, and you really can work together as a team. And so you come into it as partners not just, a vendor, serial relationship, but really as a partnership to develop those strategies and implement those tactics that ultimately our goal is to drive patient recruitment.
That's great. Thank you so much. And this is the last question that we have time for today. What if conducting a full feasibility upfront is too costly? Are there any shortcuts?
I'll take that one. So no, I believe that performing full feasibility actually protects one's study budget by gaining a real understanding of the landscape you're working in and allowing you to manage risk effectively through mitigation and contingency tactics, as I discussed earlier. However, I think the use of KOLs can work as a fantastic influencing opportunity to build interest both from other sites and investigators as well as patients. And then I think something here we can also discuss is Medpace believe in this so much, where we're different to our competitors in the fact that we actually provide this service as a value add. So we really feel it's key in conducting a study for our sponsors. So we think it's always needed.
That's great. Thank you so much, Catherine. And unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for questions today. Once again, thank you so much, Maisha and Catherine, for a great session.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. If anyone has submitted a question that wasn't addressed, please do keep in mind that the speaker will reach out to you directly. This session was recorded. You'll receive a notification in 24 hours when the on-demand session is available for viewing. Also, don't forget about all the downloadable resources in the resources box to the left of your slides. Before you log off, please take a moment to complete the feedback form so we can continue to improve your digital leak experience. On behalf of Connect 365 Life Sciences,